This is our first session, and we're going to be discussing generational and gender issues in the workplace and how that can be a great positive change for your practice. First of all, though, I am Gail Perry, your moderator, one of your moderators. I'm editor-in-chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine. So before we get started, let me just tell you who else we have with us on our panel. We have next to me is Meredith Root. Meredith is senior accountant at Root & Associates in Bloomington, Indiana, and staff member at RootWorks. Next we have Mary Bennett. Mary is a diversity consultant for many accounting firms and the former head of the Women's Initiative Committee at the AICPA. Also, we have Tom Hood, who's CEO and executive director of the Maryland Association of CPAs. And he's CEO of our sponsor for this session, the Business Learning Institute. And at the far end of the table, we have Alexander DeFelice, who is my co-anchor for the session today. And Alexander is senior manager at Moore Stevens North America. So to get us started talking about the positive change that generational and gender issues can have in the workplace, we want to just sort of draw the scenario of the stereotypical accountant who, if you think of an accountant, you probably think older, male, been in the profession 20, 30 years. I think we're probably past the green eye shade stereotype, but it's still kind of a standard person who's been doing the same process for a long period of time and knows that that's a really good process and it really works. And perhaps is having some difficulty or transitional issues in bringing people into the workplace who don't look like him, who are either women, are younger, have new ideas and different expectations. And that may not describe your firm, but I think in general it kind of describes a lot of the firms that we see. And so we're just going to kind of kick it off with that idea and talk about what that workplace looks like and how it's changing and how that's affecting the scene of the accounting profession today. So, Mary, would you like to jump in?
Sure. As Gail said, the demographics in the United States and in the profession have been changing for a long time. Obviously, women have been in the profession in equal numbers to men for over 30 years. We see that in the lower ranks, but we don't see it at the partner levels. In most firms, we're still at about 19%, actually down from a high of 23%, so going the wrong way. The demographics in the United States, as far as generations, have changed quite a lot, and there's changes happening both related to gender and generation with our clients, which may or may not right now be recognized very well by the baby boomers who are leading the firms, and that's actually a big challenge, I think. Networks are changing, business development's changing, where you go to get new clients, who the entrepreneurs are, all of those things are changing, but many firms are not necessarily recognizing those changes in the marketplace. Tom, have you seen that yourself?
Yeah, so first of all, when Gail was doing the introduction, I think she was talking about me, right? The old white guy, the baby boomer. I think I'm the token old guy on this panel. But the generational issue, it kind of surprises me how much it keeps coming up. I think the generational, the diversity, and the gender are significant. So two things. One, that we've seen, one of the statistics that I think is waking a lot of our members up is the Gen X stat, right? So it's basically a big smile curve. And at this end would be the baby boomers who are starting to retire, but not always, and they're still mature generation in the workforce. At the bottom is Gen X, and over here would be Gen Y. Gen X is only one Gen Xer for every two baby boomers. And that's going to create, it is already creating a talent shortage at the leadership level. So the bench for people that are going to replace the boomer retiring is only half of what they truly need. That's assuming no growth. Now that we're starting to come out of this post-recession environment, it's starting to shift things, right? So people are more mobile. So this talent thing is heating up dramatically. And then throw in all the other mix. If you're not embracing generations and diversity, it's a big disadvantage from that standpoint. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing. And it's funny how across the entire profession, when we look at our members who are in business and industry, government, nonprofit, as well as practice, small practice up to the big firms, it's universal.
You know, I think it's one thing to say embracing generations and diversity in the workplace, and that's a good thing, but how does that really translate into real life situations? How do you make that work?
Meredith, what do you? Yeah, I was gonna say, like, let's talk to.
I'm the other
you're
side
a Gen
of
Y,
you.
right? Now, are you a Gen Xer, Mary? That would make a perfect thing. We got.
I probably shouldn't say, right?
You look like a Gen Y.
Oh, right. I would say I'm on the cusp of the Gen X and baby boomers.
All right, so we got you guys like lined up perfectly.
Yeah.
But what is it about? What is it that you look for?
I want to work for a firm that is open to change, is willing to embrace technology, willing to create a culture that embraces the mobile environment that we all actually live in. The accounting firms are kind of a little bubble that seem to be having the most difficulty embracing the mobile aspect in the workplace. But everyone who works in a firm actually loves it. I mean, think about your Chase mobile app, your banking, anything that you do, you're online and you're connected all the time. So for me, that is a huge thing that I look for.
Yeah.
That and embracing different diversities. To me, that's just a normal part of reality,
Right.
is having diversity wherever I am.
So
You know, and just to expand on that, we were having a conversation over dinner last night about, a lot of younger people, and I'm Gen X, by the way, so so they say, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be this guy that's working all the time. And we were at dinner with someone, and he's like, I was working over the Christmas holiday at my home in Florida, and I was working from Christmas to, this was last year, obviously, from Christmas to New Year's. And I said to Meredith, I'm like, but you wanna be like this person? And she's like, you missed the point that it was in Florida, and I was able to work from Florida versus a basement in Minnesota somewhere. It's about giving people what they want, and we were talking about that. If you address what the younger generation wants, it's something that really everybody wants of every generation. It's just the older generation tends not to speak up about that. Is that true in your research that you find, Mary?
Yeah, I think it is true, and I think it's one of the interesting things about the whole career life piece is that we have as much of a challenge now, I think, with baby boomers as we do with the X's and Y's, because the baby boomers need to start thinking about retirement, and it's a huge life issue to consider. How do you retire effectively? What is going to be your encore career, in effect? That is as much of a life issue that requires us to adjust the way that we're doing things as what the Gen Xers want or what the Gen Ys want. How do you do that in a way that's going to work for the firm, and how do you do it in a way that's going to work for the person? So there's a basis there, or a foundation, I think, for really good dialogue. We just aren't necessarily having that good dialogue.
I also think there's a common misconception that the younger generations don't want to work as hard as the baby boomers. That's not necessarily the case. I don't care to work a lot, but like you said, if I'm able to work from the beach in those extra times at some point, when it's appropriate.
And
that makes it easier.
That's a really good point you bring up, because that's what we hear all the time at all of these conferences. The kids these days, they don't want to work hard. We just had a conference for my association, Moore Stevens, and the guy has these clients that are internet startup clients. So look at those guys. They're all, in their 20s. They're owners of companies. They're working around the clock, but they're having fun doing it. They're bringing in food. They're playing games, and they're loving their life.
They've created a good culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we call it like work-life integration, right? Yes. So it's being able to do those things. The other thing we're seeing is the baby boomers, my generation, is now also experiencing what we call the sandwich generation. So we often have kids who are in college who sometimes don't have jobs and come back home and live in the basement and stay with us. And then we have aging parents who often have extreme health issues that sometimes make us take time away from work. So we're now getting to a phenomena where a lot of the baby boomers, if you really sit down with them, would say, I'd love to have the flexibility to be able to work from wherever I am, so I could go to wherever my parents are and take care of them for a couple of months or do those kinds of things. I think that's something else that we're starting to see more of. I think what's missing is, what I keep hearing is, we're having these generational conversations without talking to each other. So the millennials are talking about the boomers are talking about the millennials, the Xers are kind of, I call them the lost generation. And I think actually the Gen Xers are the linchpins. You're the ones that truly understand both sides of it. Gen Xers wanted work-life balance, but never had the bargaining power that Gen Y did. And as a result, they've been ignored. And so I've declared this year as absolutely National Hug Your Gen Xer year. So I think, because I think they're critical, I'm seeing them leave the profession because they're getting burnt out, right? They're working under the workaholic baby boomers who aren't always adaptable, and they're stuck with trying to manage millennials that they don't have the talent or skills to manage this very different generation. And as a result, they end up sucking up a lot of the work, not being able to delegate. And I'm seeing that show up in our Leadership Academy groups, where it's showing up in our young professional conferences, and it, quite frankly, that worries me. I think it's the biggest risk we have, because that's the next level of leadership. There's only half of them, and if they start leaving, you know, what's going to be left from that perspective?
And I think that they, unlike the boomers, a lot of them will leave after they've already made partner, which is something that is not anticipated. We
Yes.
think, well, once we get them to partner, they'll be there forever, and it's not true. And I agree with you 100%. I think they have the potential to be our interpreters if we give them the authority and the opportunity to be that, but they're squeezed. As you said, they're very much squeezed, and so they're silent till they leave. I would agree.
So how do firms initiate this kind of communication between the different generations in the workplace, and how do they really make it okay to say what's really on your mind without feeling threatened or worried that someone's going to either make fun of you or not want to promote you or somehow not take you seriously?
One of the things that I've seen that works really well is to provide some baseline education about what's happening with each one of the generations in almost like a lighthearted or a fun way, and give them the opportunity to explore that information, because then you sort of get all of these differences out on the table. And I find, like with any other kind of diversity effort, getting the differences out on the table and giving people the opportunity to talk about those, and not only just the differences, but how those things are not the right way or the wrong way. That's part of the problem we have, is the boomers have kind of grown up believing, well, this is the way we do things, and it is the one right way. There is not one right way. And so if you can get all of these differences and these different perspectives on the table, and then allow people the opportunity to talk about them, and begin to explore how they may be beneficial from a business standpoint, but do it in a sort of a fun kind of a way, it can really break open the conversation loops and get people talking to each other instead of about each other, as you said.
So, I mean, in order to do that, because, you know, the people here, they want to come back, they want to either they're the owners of the firm and they're going to implement this, or they want to go back and tell this to their bosses. What's a way to do that? I mean, do they need to bring in an outside person so that it's a safe environment? Do they need to leave the firm? Is it a game? Like, what have you seen people do that works?
I think there's a lot of things that work. I think sometimes turning some of the meetings that already exist into something that's more along the lines of what I described can help. Inserting these conversations into meetings you're already having. It's not a one-time event. It's a layered experience that people have. I think you can bring people in from the outside, and that can create a safe space, which is sometimes a good idea if you feel like the first few conversations are going to be really tough. But I also think that certain partners, you know, maybe the Gen X's, you can do a train the trainer kind of thing, and you can prepare them, especially if the firm is large, to have the conversation, and then you can bring all of your findings back central, and then from there comes eventually what are the things we're going to do, you know, with this information. What are the action plans we're going to form to create real change? But you can't, at least in my experience, you can't have that real change unless you have given people the opportunity to voice what they're experiencing with each other. You've got to get that out of the way before you can, and get buy-in in effect. The other thing is many of these people don't realize what a critical business issue this is. And that's another important part of the conversation you have to have, is we're not doing this for fun or to be nice. This is a serious business issue, as you were saying, about the sustainability of these firms, and we have to deal with this, all of us together, just like we would deal with any other business issue we have.
One of the things you mentioned is how it affects clients, and I think this could be a positive. You could change the negative into a positive, right? So Gail and I were talking last night about how some people will write, are you, and that seems lazy to an older generation versus spelling it out. And they say, well, I save time by not putting these extra keystrokes. One of the things I'm seeing is my firms that have, especially going back to the internet, but they're younger clients, they want to see people like them. They don't necessarily want to deal with the older people. They want people that use their technology, et cetera. So the firms are training younger people to talk to these younger clients. Are you seeing things like that? What are other opportunities versus challenges, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's in the firms that are struggling with succession planning retirements, that's not happening. So I think that, from the positive end, the firms that are bringing in the people and identifying who the contacts are that are below, let's say, the soon-to-retire owner of the business, and getting those relationships solidly in place for the next, the turnover that's going to happen at the client as well as in the firm, they're on much more solid ground than the firms that are really worried that when the big rainmaker retires, they're going to lose all of his clients. That's a huge part of that. I don't only think it's the current clients, I think it's all of the business networks. You think about the changes happening in all of the business networks. There's maybe a belief that we still have to do all of our business development at the country club, for example. There's a whole group of entrepreneurial people who are starting businesses and running businesses who aren't at the country club. That's just one example. It's not an either or. It's an and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen some firms that, back to, I think, what Mary said earlier about the, getting a baseline of people understanding the generational issues and kind of have a little bit of fun with it, but understanding what those differences are and how you might close those. Why not invite your clients in because they're experiencing the same thing? So you could actually bring a training group in, do the generational issue, and bring your clients in. Then you've got client development and generational conversations. But the biggest thing, back to what Gail asked earlier, I see is, how do you do it? It's about participation and collaboration. And, our answer to that is sticky notes. So, one of the most powerful tools, how many times do people have a meeting and the boomers will say, I bring everyone in and I ask them what's on their mind, and they just sit there because they're not going to participate, right? So that's the challenge. Yeah. The boomer would say, I'm asking them, but they're not telling me. And one of the simple techniques we say is give people time to write down their thoughts. So if there's one tool for all of you to increase participation at any meeting, but especially as we start talking about moving cross-generational things, is to say you have to set it up as safe and you have to have a record of listening. So that's number one. But then the second thing is just when everyone sits down at the table, say, take 3 minutes and write down your thoughts. Because if people have time to write and collect their thoughts, they're much more likely to participate.
Can you make it anonymous?
Yeah, well, and you can do that.
And then bring it into the meeting and have discussion points, and then no one feels, I guess, embarrassed that they're going to get looked down upon if they've made a comment about.
Great point. So Google Doc, right? Create a Google Doc and say, everybody put your thoughts in here, anonymously, and we'll bring that out the meeting. We'll read that and try to find out what the biggest issues are. And that's when sticky notes come in, right? Just get everyone say, all right, let's take this Google Doc and in a couple of small groups, give me the 5 big things you think are the big issues for us and put them up on a wall and collect them and prioritize. And suddenly people are participating, which means they're going to buy into what you ultimately do. Right? That's, I think, a big piece.
There's so many benefits to be gained from it, because once you get to know a little bit about what each generation thinks and how they like to work, younger generations really like efficiency, like just the letters RU. Mm-hmm. The baby boomers generation are really good at what they do. They have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. When you put them both together, you could develop a really great firm, a really well-running firm that maybe isn't solely focused or only running on the rainmaker.
Right.
Your whole firm can run without that person. It can continue after that person leaves.
Yeah.
I've seen that same concept with technology too. So, brave firms that will actually give people, the opportunity when they're sitting in the room to put things, anonymously, to your point, can type things in and have it show up on the screen, just like or polling can work too, to see as you're drilling down into these issues, excuse me, are we on the right track? Is this where you wanted us to go? And that can really encourage participation, but still make them feel safe that they can have a voice, but there won't be, career-limiting move as a result.
Okay.
How about polling the audience? And can we find out what the audience generationally looks like and maybe what their biggest generational challenges are.
Okay, so our polling software today, if you want to text your answer to 22333, or you can tweet your answer to @poll. We want to see what generation you are. So if you're a senior or mature, you will text 317269. If you are a boomer, you will text or tweet to 317270. If you are Gen X, you are going to do 317307. And if you are Gen Y, 317356. So I'll hold those up for a while, and I'll get back once we get the results in, and I will let you know who's on the meeting today.
Cool. You know, one of the things that we often talk about or hear about is members of the older generation trying to find ways to, or we hope they're trying to find ways to incorporate millennials and Gen Xers into the practice. And, you know, obviously, if they're thinking about a succession plan and they want to be able to leave a legacy or move forward from their firm, cut back to part-time or to Florida or to just not doing quite as much work as they had been before. But if we were to flip that and talk about starting with the millennials and talk about how they can incorporate the older generations into their point of view, are there workshops, are there techniques that can be done, things that will really help break down those barriers and help all those generations work together, but have that kind of being led by the younger group?
You know, so when we work with a lot of the younger ones who, the saddest thing I had is one of the last leadership academies we did, one of the sticky notes that was generated by the group was, we have ideas but no power. And that just made me feel really sad. You know, like these guys are just dying to get and help make it better. And it's not all about give me things as a millennial. It's about how can we do a win-win idea. So what we told them is you have to start with your circle of influence. So don't try to go, whatever you do, don't go back and tell the partners or the CEO or CFO that everything you're doing is wrong and you have the right idea. That won't work. So we said, start with your own group. If you have a team that you're responsible for or a small group, work collaboratively with them, co-create how you're going to make things better, and then that example will start to spiral. The other part is, how can you talk to the boomers and say, what are the cool things that got us here that we want to make sure we take with us into the future? So we always like to say, when we do a kind of a history story, what do you want to take with you and what do you want to leave behind? And the take-withs are always the legacy. Usually it's the values and the vision that came from the original starting point of the firm or the company. And so I think the first part is respect the legacy and say there are a lot of things, I think as Meredith just said, that you guys can bring to the table that we need to learn. So if you start with kind of, it's the Covey thing, right? Seek to understand first. So listen to them and get them in this game and then say, now how can we work together to maybe create something even better? You know, our best scenario is get everyone in a room and say, how can we make this firm a great place to work? If it's co-created by everyone, they're going to buy in and they're going to make it happen. And then it's not all on the owners and the partners and that kind of thing. So that's some things that we're starting to see now where firms are doing strategy with the entire firm. That is very cool. And you're just seeing these people on fire, all generations. So it's not just a millennial boomer thing, it's everybody.
Yeah, I've seen firms that are starting to get rid of the partner meeting sacred cow and bring the managers into the meetings and not actually have a partner meeting, but have a manager, senior manager, partner retreat, which is a big step, because those partner meetings for years have been, sort of almost like the annual reward system that they had, right? The big golf week. But that's something that's really changing things. One of the things I've seen also is just teaching them a little bit about how, really what is bias or perceptual filters, but teaching them a little bit about how they see each other and where those perspectives come from and why that prevents them from engaging collaboratively teach them a little bit about those things and get them to laugh about it a little bit. How do you come to have your view on the world, and that is in fact just your view on the world? Everyone doesn't share that view, and that doesn't make your view right and their view wrong. And so some of those things can help set the stage for people to then participate more in active listening, to your point, and be willing to actually hear what someone else is saying, and to realize that maybe the way that I've framed this entire thing is not the only way that it can be framed, that it could be reframed with both of our perspectives. So some of those kinds of things can help sometimes, again, to create the safe space and to get both sides, because I do think it's both, and you said that really well, Meredith. I do think that there's as much, as much as the boomers are saying the young guys don't want to work, the young folks are saying, they don't know anything, they can't use technology, everything that they're doing is wrong. And it's really the blending of the two that's going to give us the power, and that's really where we need to go.
How about you, Meredith? So how do you convince your dad to change something?
Might have an advantage now.
It could be a disadvantage too, right?
A really good example I just thought of while this conversation was going on. I was sitting with a coworker, and she would be a baby boomer, and I was watching her do something for a particular client, and she was using Excel to just do some calculations and run some things. And as she was sitting there, I was like, do you do this every 2 weeks, every month? How often are you doing this spreadsheet? And she said she has to do it twice a month. I said, well, if you just type in this formula, you can copy, and you don't have to sit there and type everything in over and over and over again. She just looked at me, she said, you just saved me a half an hour a month. What else do you know? Right. So it's little things. If you don't have the confidence to go to the partner and say, I can help, make this process maybe run a little bit more efficient, start small. Start with the people that you work with and show them little things that just make their lives easier. Yeah. And that could open the door to have the bigger conversation, or to have the meeting that discusses it, anything. So just even starting small.
But I like what you said, what's in it for me? Because that's the biggest barrier, right? They don't want to change because it works. This has always worked. I sit here and I enter this formula, and why should I change it? It works. Well, what's in it for you is I'm giving you an hour of your life back every month, and what can you do with that time? Whether it's more money for the firm, more time to yourself, whatever the case might be. So I have the polling results in, and we don't have any Gen Y on the call today, on the webinar today. It is 71%, or at least they didn't want to take the time to answer the text, and the seniors didn't know how to text. So we have 71% boomers and 29% Gen X that responded to the poll today. I did want to go back, Mary, to your point about the not having just the partner meetings and the seniors and managers. I actually just visited a firm where the executive team tasked their senior managers with coming up with a revised strategic plan, a 2-page plan for the firm, without them in the room. And they had to present it, made a few tweaks, and that is what they are embracing. And I mean, talk about getting buy-in, and you say, I helped set the firm's direction. You're gonna want to stay. You're gonna want to remain.
See how
in the
it
firm.
plays out, right? Yeah, that's very interesting.
We're seeing firms using that idea as a recruitment and retention tool. In other words, if you involve everyone in the future of the firm, then it's their firm, right? They feel like they're partners, even if they're not yet. And when you go out to a college campus and say, if you come to our firm, you're going to be involved in creating a future with us, you'll be in our strat plan, that's a huge, it's exactly what Gen Y wants, to be a participant, right? They want to. And you don't have to do everything the Gen Y folks tell you, but you have to tell them why you're not, right? You have to listen and then say, you know what, it's a great idea, but here's why we can't do that. If you just say, I'm listening, and then don't do anything, that's a bad thing. But that's what I'm seeing over and over again.
You make a great point. Gen Ys, they want to work for a firm that they're proud of, whether it's a brand that's just really powerful, whether it's your firm likes to do community service, whether you're a tech-driven firm, whatever it is, they want to work for a culture and a brand that they're proud of, and they want to be part of it. Yep. So even if you don't like a Gen Y idea, that's fine. But if you tell them why, and why maybe from your experience that might not work out, then that's okay. They can go back to the drawing board and maybe try to think of something else so you can work together to figure out another solution.
And that's a big misperception. Many of the boomers feel if all they want to do is tell me what they want. Right, and that's the barrier, because it's not true. If you say, let's create a model where we want the customer to win and the firm to win and you to win, that's what we want. If we can figure that out, let's solve for that problem, right? That's the answer.
I think some of the big differences that are holding us back, and this is largely, for the boomers to consider, is that the Ys in particular, and I think the X's, if they were honest, they want to have more dialogue. And I think the boomers are used to the way they came through the profession, which is, here's what you need to do, and, go do it. And they did it because that's what they were raised to do. And so that is their expectation. But so I find with many of them that the most challenging part is to engage in this dialogue, to actually take the time. It takes away from, in their mind, billable hours. We didn't have to do that. Nobody did this for us. They should just stay because this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to them in their life. And I think that piece of resistance is something we have to find a way to get past, is to develop that patience and that willingness to sit down and have the conversation, because in particular the Ys, they want more communication. They want to have a dialogue on this, whether some of it's electronically done, some of it's in person. There could be a lot of ways to have that dialogue. I know one of my clients is doing a big communication hub. So part of the way they get everyone engaged is by doing that communication hub. But you have to be willing to engage in that dialogue, because they're not of the generation that's just gonna wait and gonna sit and just do what you say, and not engage in that dialogue. They'll go somewhere where someone's willing to talk with them.
Yeah.
They want to talk.
Okay, and one thing, when we were talking about the points we wanted to discuss in this session a few weeks ago, when we were as a group talking about this, one of the things that Meredith pointed out I thought was interesting is she said that her generation often feels like the older generation in the workplace is treating them like they're the parents and you're the kids. And I think that's fascinating, because when I joined the accounting workplace, the generation that was in charge wasn't old enough to be my parents. So there were people that were more like TAs or young professors, and they were interesting mentors, but they were sort of on the same wavelength with me. And I don't know where the older partners went, or if they had just retired early. But most of the people in the workplace were either my age or within 10 years of my age, it seemed. At least that was the experience I had. And now that you've got 3 solid generations in the workplace, and these baby boomers will not quit, they're just hanging on and hanging on. And so they are the parents, and they're bringing some, in your case, literally, but they're bringing their children into the workplace. So they do have this attitude that, I'm the parent, I know better, I get to tell you what to do because I'm the parent. And so how do we overcome that?
It's funny. I was at CCH. We were doing a session on at their user conference on generational issues, and we had boomers and Xers and Ys in the room. And because they were all from different firms, they were much more vocal, and it was fascinating to watch. So at one point, you could see two of the boomers in the room, started to get their comment together when we were asking, and I could see the body language, the arms crossed, the face sterns up, and they start this thing, right? And one of the Gen Ys said, just look at your body language. Like, just look at what you're doing. That's what we don't like, because you're giving me a condescending, you're talking about us in this so part of it is just self-awareness. So it's about catching ourselves kind of in that moment. And it's both ways, right? So both generations, or all generations, can end up doing that. But I thought that was fascinating, because that's probably the first time they ever got pointed out. And it was a man and a woman who were both boomers that were giving away that very disdainful kind of body language. So I think that's a beginning. We have to just be more aware, because if you want them to really tell you what's going on, you can't do it with that kind of body language. And the only other point I'll make, if you watched Meredith when she was talking about some of the things that she wanted in firms or what was important to her, you could see her eyes light up, Meredith. Like you were exhibiting exactly what, and I would argue for anyone out there, isn't that what you want? You want the eyes to light up. You want them to be all in. You don't want them to be just giving you their, 9 to 5 kind of attitude. And you could just see that when you started talking about the things that are important to you, you just instantly, your whole body position just changed from that standpoint. So that's it right there. If you want that, we've got to start learning how to listen, collaborate, and co-create instead of always telling them this is the way it's done. Is there a different way? Can we work, but we still have to serve the client, make the firm successful, and accommodate all of us. That's the formula. If you do that, it works.
You know what, Tom? I was in that session of yours, and it was quite a heated debate. I can assure you
Still
of that.
kids,
They started yelling at each other. It was after lunch. Maybe someone spiked their food. I don't know. But one of the things that came up at that session, which gets even deeper into what people want in communication, is, and we're going to talk about metrics later today in another session, but it's that the partners don't share the metrics. So they go into this secret meeting in the secret room, and they know what matters to make the firm successful, and they don't share it with the younger generation.
Right.
And you had mentioned that you asked some of these people, why do you leave? And you said, because I have no idea what the firm is doing, how much we're making. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, it's funny. We've done a couple surveys with either the leadership level, which would be more than likely Gen Xers with some Gen Ys, and with just pure Gen Ys. And we did a session called 11 Things what would you like to tell your managing partner or your CFO, CEO, if you could, but you know that you can't. And they immediately gave on a blind polling area. And number 1, transparency. Number 2, collaboration. Then there were all kinds of other things like the billable hour issue. I don't feel like I have time to think or to talk or to work with other people. Those were all key areas, right? So again, I call it, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And so taking that time to let people work together will give you that discretionary effort, will give you that spark that will give you tons and tons of better customer service and better productivity. So it really, we have to try to get out of this mindset of it's all about billable hour or it's all about just cranking work out, and say there's got to be time to work on the business and work on the relationships to make this, if you want to keep the folks. And I'm going to tell you, the talent war is it's heating up today. Front page of USA Today. When I woke up my hotel room, there it was, something like the workforce is now mobile. So like 16% of people are ready to job hop instantly. Another 26%, they said, are looking into next year. That's significant, right? What's the cost of turnover from that standpoint? So,
yeah, it's definitely crisis stage, so it's really not a choice anymore. And I think sometimes we're still sort of waiting it out, thinking, well, eventually they'll come around to see our point of view again, because this is such a great opportunity, and that is not going to happen because they have so many options.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think that the key is in this dialogue and realizing that in the end, taking that time is going to pay huge dividends, and we're not going to outlast them.
Yeah.
We're not going to, they're not just going to one day wake up and say, okay, well, I'll just wait and see. And in an ironic sort of way, spending that time takes care of one of the things that boomers are most concerned about, is that all of these entrepreneurial ideas and things that light up, your eyes are going to be things that aren't in alignment with the business. But if we take the time to teach them about the business,
right,
then the solutions
they will do it alignment.
And the things that they come up with are going to be increasingly in alignment.
Right.
But we're not taking that time.
Right.
We're not taking that time.
Teach them the business and then say, help us make the business better. That's what they want to do. And they'll help. I mean, that's the beauty, is instead of the partners having to take it all on themselves, now you've got these young folks that are like really psyched up about things, and they're going to make it happen.
We keep going back to creating a culture that makes people want to stay, and talking about the talent war and going mobile. We were talking at dinner last night. My fiance and I just moved from Chicago, and he works for JP Morgan. And when we decided to move back to Indiana, he started looking for other job opportunities because they didn't have his investment banking group in Indianapolis. So he went to tell them that he was leaving and going to start interviewing, and their response was, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you don't have to do that. And he was, why won't I have to do that? You guys are in Chicago and I'm moving and everything else. And they said, well, you can work remotely. Yeah. We want you to stay, so work remotely out of Indianapolis. And that's what he's doing now, and he's loving it. And I mean, that's going to retain him. He's ingrained now.
Right.
You know, they won his trust over. They created that culture to make that happen. So,
but you definitely have to have trust, because there's always there's still that perception that if you're not, presenteeism, if you're not physically there, you're not working. So, how do you get over that? Have you seen firms that are doing this successfully?
Yeah, there are firms that are doing that. I mean, I think you talk about the results-only work environments, or just other ways of thinking about how the work gets done. I mean, if you know how the work gets done, then do you really care whether it's done sitting down at this desk, or it's done in a pure 8-hour window, or it's done over 12 hours with breaks in between? I mean, as long as the work gets done and the clients get served, if it's a firm environment, why do you care about that? I mean, I think the other part is, what's the cost of turnover, right? The cost of turning over people is huge. So, having your husband stay versus what it costs, what do they say? It's 1.5 times salary, two times, 2.5, so 2.5 times every salary to retrain, bring them in, recruit them, all that stuff, and all the downtime you lose. Not to mention, who has to suck up that work, right? Your Gen Xers and your Boomers, So that's what I would say to that.
Sometimes I think it's, it feels like a trust issue, but as I've observed more closely, I think sometimes it's actually a retooling of supervisory or management skills, because people aren't born knowing how to manage someone flexibly. And that is a skill that you can teach people, that people can learn how to do. So how do you take all of the ways in which you used to manage people and hold them accountable, and how do you transition those into a more virtual, more flexible type of environment or scenario? Once they have the skills to do it, and they have a better sense of how they can do it, then they're more apt to let go of some of the resistance. But what happens is they try to do it the way they do it when they're working down the hall from someone. They try to do it the same way, and that's what they're thinking. Well, I'm used to just getting up and walking down to this person's desk, or worse, leaning my head out of my office door and yelling for the person. Teaching them what is the counterpart, or possibly even a better way to hold someone accountable in the new environment. And even some of the Gen X, and now even maybe Gen Y managers, we have to teach them as well, because they've been ingrained in this environment so long that they haven't grown up learning how to manage people that way. So the sooner we do that, I think, the better. And we do, it adds to that sense of mistrust, and I think sometimes it's more of a skill building thing than a trust thing. It just feels like trust.
At RootWorks, we have 10 to 12 people who work in various cities all over the country, and it's teleconference. We video conference every day. I sit, my office is just a stone throw away from my dad, and all day I can hear him on Zoom is what they use, talking to everybody in Colorado, in Ann Arbor, in Austin, wherever. And those guys kill it. They are so productive, and they come up with an idea, and it's done in a week. And they're constantly in communication. So you build that trust, and you build that relationship. And you're still seeing each other face to face, and you still create that relationship that allows you to do that.
And you bring them in for high impact in-person meetings, right? Mostly about culture and vision and strategy, right? That's so then if you have a strong culture wrapped around that, that's where that trust comes from. And then you use technology, all kinds of great tools out there, everything from Google Docs to Zoom, the Google Hangouts, et cetera, Skype, to be able to get that face-to-face still happening. And I think that's what I think we're going to end up with, and we're starting to develop some of this, remote leadership training. Because I think we now have a new breed of leader that's going to be, how do you manage a totally remote group, or a very remote group that's half and half or something. So, yeah.
I think just in the last 2 minutes here, I'd like to just go through the panel here and talk about what are the key things that a firm that's watching right now could do if this sounds like where they want to be, is making progress with their staff that's diverse or that has generational differences, what are the steps that they could do like next week as opposed to the big picture of, yeah, here's where we want to be in 3 years?
Take someone to lunch. Take them to lunch, get to know them, ask them what they like, what they don't like, what they want. Getting to know people makes them more open.
I would say start the dialogue in whatever way you can. And your firm, we heard a lot of great ideas today, electronically, Post-it notes. Start having the conversation, but don't end it there. Make sure that you have follow through all the way to actually making some changes.
And I'd say, call a meeting, get representatives of all your generations in a room, and just say, how could we make this a really, really killer firm, serving our clients and meeting all of our needs, and get them to start brainstorming.
Excellent. Thank you all so much today, and we are thrilled that Business Learning Institute is sponsoring this session, and we'd like to give Tom just a couple minutes here at the end to tell you just a little bit about Business Learning Institute, so please stay tuned for that.
Well, the quick story is BLI, Business Learning Institute, was our learning and innovation center. The association, MACPA, started about 15 years ago, and it was based on research from the AICPA Vision Project about the skills CPAs would need in the future. And those skills, by the way, were a lot more than technical. So it was leadership, strategic thinking, communication, collaboration. And so we started building out a way of training and helping people. So everything from strategic planning, curriculum design, learning management, as well as programming to help what we call success skills. So go online, blionline.org is our website address. And it's great to be here and sponsoring this with you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we go, we just had one quick question come in from the audience. So let's just take a minute to address that. If we were to take what we've discussed today and flip that to, instead of talking about accountants within their firm dealing with generational issues, but instead their clients and how their clients are dealing with generational issues and how accountants can help with that, what kind of things have you guys seen?
Tom, you made a great point earlier, is to have lunch and learn or something with your clients and bring them in. So I'll let you.
Right. I mean, I think it's like solve the problem together. Like they're all dealing with the same exact thing. Your small business owners are struggling. So why not bring a speaker in? It makes it even more affordable. It becomes business development and training your own team. Get them together, multiple generations if you can, and get them in a room and teach them. We did that with a couple of firms. And then the other part is, if you learn your way in how to do this and you do it well with your own culture, what about teaching that to your clients as a service line? I mean, it could be a new line of business, right? And because they're all struggling with that. And I think at the end of the day, it's also the same skill set. If you teach your folks how to collaborate and listen well, then when they do that with a customer, multi-generations, et cetera, it's the same exact thing. That would be my tip from that.
I would agree, it's the same skills, and it isn't only generational. There's the gender changes and ethnicity changes, and this is, sometimes we call it multicultural competency. All the people coming up through the ranks now are going to need it, and so I agree with you 100%. It isn't only internally, teaching them, and you could very well send a team of a baby boomer, an X and a Y out to the client, and you could work with your client on these issues together as a shared team, and everyone would learn in that process. So.
Yep.
And it shows your client that you're on top of it.
Absolutely, right?
Become their trusted advisor.
Yeah.